So I'd like to welcome you to the Active Hope Foundations Training soft launch webinar. And I've got a lovely picture to go along with this. I'm Chris Johnston. I'm calling in from the northeast of Scotland, and I hear we're joined. I don't know how many countries, Madeline, you counted, or parts of the world, but I just want to share this picture just to start with. And I love this image. And I love this image of a goose. There's something about geese, the model of leadership that geese have, where they take it in turns to be out in front. And so I'm out in front a bit in this session, but also in support and alongside all of you, that we'll be taking our times where we'll step out there, leading in our different ways in Active Hope. And one of the things, when Madeline was leading, one thing I learned from her, and I'm going to suggest that we do this just now, is just a way of beginning, by settling in. And basically, I'm going to ask you to look at my hands. And as I breathe in, I'm going to have my fingers going out like that. And as I breathe out, I'm going to have my fingers going in like this. And I'm going to ask you to join me. I'm going to ask you to join me holding your fingers out, because it also looks great on in view and in Zoom. So as you breathe in, and as you breathe out, and as you breathe in, and breathing out, and breathing in. And when we breathe out, so I was just going to do this for 3 breaths. And there's something here about breathing in is also inspiration. And when we do this, it's like we are inspiring together, or even co-inspiring together. And I just love this idea of co-inspiration, how we breathe in together, how we take in things together, but also as we breathe out, we make our offering. I think of it as our gift of Active Hope. And I'm going to be moving into the share again. In terms of this webinar, there's 2 core elements, really. One is I wanted to introduce the free Active Hope training online course, Active Hope Foundations Training, that launches really today. And I think of it as a soft launch. We're not publicizing it very widely just at the moment, but we're making a start. And we'd love your feedback if you want to give it a try out. It's a video-based course that's released in 6 episodes at weekly intervals just over the next 6 weeks. But once you start, you can actually do it at your own pace. And one of the practices from that, and the reason we do it sort of once a week, is that there's some videos, but a key part of the course is inviting you to try out a practice. And the practice that I'd love to introduce in this session is a 7-step regenerative spiral. And in terms of why, there's one central question that we're dedicated to responding to, really, with setting up this webinar and the course, which is what helps us face the mess we're in and respond with Active Hope. Now, I'm also aware that idea, the mess we're in, that may be completely familiar to you, but sometimes when I say mess we're in, people say, what mess? You know, I know that things are completely disrupted in so many ways with COVID, but there is a sense that some people might wish to return to a previous business as usual. And I just wanted to check with you this sense of a mess we're in. If we were to do a kind of problemometer of how serious are the problems we face, we could call this a messometer. So 10 out of 10 is a catastrophic mess, and 0 out of 10 is there's no problem at all. I'm actually going to ask you to put your own response in on a 1 to 10 scale. We're going to do a poll in just a moment, and you might have a sense of where we are in terms of how serious a mess are we in. It might be here, or you might even think we're up here, or certainly heading in that direction, but not just how severe a mess are we in. And this, you might have be familiar to you with the short video that is part of the video-based online course, but also how do you rate our collective response? Not just the few people you know, but an average overall. If you were to say, what's the average response of humanity to the problems we face on planet Earth right now? And so again, kind of where would you place the scale? And over here is might be everyone's involved in a widespread, empowered, inspiring creative response. But over here, it's a much less well-developed response. I'm gonna start the polling, and I'm just gonna ask you to rate those two. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to close the poll in 5 seconds. 4, vote if you want to, 3, 2, and 1, and let's see what that shows. So in terms of the size of the problem, the commonest response is 8. Some of you put it higher, and in fact, 86% say 8 and above. 96%, 95% say 7 and above in terms of how severe the problem. But in terms of how well developed the response, the commonest response is 3. 5 or less is most of you. 90% of you put 5 or less, with a 3 being the commonest response. So thank you for that. This is our starting point, because I've in fact yours was actually similar to how it's been with many other groups, that that there's a mismatch between the size of the problem and the size of the response. And holding the question why is, I think, one of the most important in terms of what blocks our collective response. And I've been interviewing people, and one of the people I interviewed was Maya. I interviewed her about how she felt about world issues, and this lasts just about a minute and a half, and it helps understand why there's this blocked response. So Maya, over to you. Thank you for joining us for this.
I recently lost one of my close friends to suicide about a year ago, and that was the first time I'd ever lost a human being close to me. And in that process of experiencing grief in its kind of like high intensity and its complete like emptiness, is actually when I started to fully realize that what I've been feeling in response to climate change a lot is actually grief, because it's this like real spectrum of like some days you just want to like scream and sob, and other days you just want to like hide away from the world, and you want to feel like it's not happening. And so yeah, I don't feel like it's possible to pinpoint one way the pain feels, because I think it has this like whole world of and spectrum of feeling in it, you know.
And have you had times in the past where it just feels too painful to look at?
Yeah, and like a lot. A lot, and I have to actually like really force myself to look at it. I think more often than not I hide away, because it just seems so, it's like, it's so horrible. It's like, how can I even look at that if I can't do anything about it? Why would I look at it, you know? And I really actually force myself to, because when I do, I connect to it more and I feel more inspired to do something about it. But yeah, I think I spent a lot of my life kind of like averting my eyes, which I feel quite ashamed admitting that, but it is the truth.
I want to thank Maya for her honesty. And I don't know if any of others of you here sometimes feel like that too. That there's this term pain for the world. It brings together it's an umbrella term for distress related to having our eyes and heart and mind open when we look out of the world and see the destruction, see the many different aspects, you know, the whole range from climate change and ecosystem destruction to the entrenched inequalities, racism, the many different ways in which we're divided and actively divided and set against each other. And what Maya said there is very interesting. There's a number of things. One is the complexity of feelings. It can feel different at different times, but also sometimes it can feel too much. And it's not the only reason for the blocked response, but it's one of them. It's one of the contributing factors. And what we really need is a way of looking at, well, okay, how do we take on the project? It's a piece of work in our time to look at what helps us sustain the gaze, what helps us keep our minds, our hearts, our eyes, and all our other senses and sensibilities open. But also, one thing Maya said is that, well, if I can't do anything, what's the point of looking? And there's a way in which powerlessness and it's too painful to look, but I feel powerless when I do. Those two feed on each other. And so I just want to name this piece of work to nourish, cultivate, encourage, develop, and grow our collective capacity, intention, and enthusiasm to make a difference in the world. And this is the title of the Spanish cover of Active Hope, the Spanish edition. And I think of that piece of work as Active Hope Training. It's taking on a piece of training work to respond with active hope. And if I say, what do I mean by active hope? It's recognizing there's a difference between hopefulness and active hope. The question, are you hopeful? We may have different responses to that, but what do we hope for? I'm guessing we'll have a lot more in common there. And what do you hope for? That's a motivating question. And this other question, how do we make our hopes more likely? One of the ways we make our hopes more likely is by giving something to them, is by giving our contribution to the process of making them more likely. And I see active hope as a practice, like Tai Chi is something you do. It's a movement practice for well-being. Active hope is a movement practice for collective well-being. It's something we do rather than have. And I'm excited now because we're launching this video-based online course in Active Hope Training. And we're just starting out with this. We're actually producing the videos at the moment. So really appreciate your patience. There's a couple that haven't actually made it up there this week, but we'll be putting out new videos every week at ActiveHope.Training. This is a new website that we invite you to. And we've also updated our website at ActiveHope.info. And the idea is that we're having a soft launch. We get your feedback and then make improvements where we needed to before we have a wider launch on the 23rd of May. And what I wanted to share with you is a practice from this course. And the course follows the spiral of the work that reconnects, that each of the different weeks has a different theme, and we're going to be having a week on gratitude, a week on honoring our pain, a week on seeing with new eyes, a week on going forth. But in the first week, we take an overview and we introduce a short form that we can do in about half an hour. And you can do this as a personal practice and probably even just about 10 minutes. It might be something that you do. You can also do it as a partnered practice, and there's a video on the course of me doing it with Dr. Dante Cancel. Really appreciate your help, Dante, in showing up with me. We've never done it before. We'd never met before, but we had this amazing conversation going around this practice. But you can also do it as a group. And I'm going to suggest that we do it now. And if you're listening to the recording, because the recording will be up on activehope.info, we invite you to join in with us too. And there might be times where we go into a breakout room, which will be part of this journey, where you just press the pause button and you take part in the inquiry too, or you might even do it with a group of other people. So we're going to begin this journey around the spiral, and we do this as a nourishing practice to nourish us and our capacity to engage in active hope. And I've been involved in work with Joanna Macy around supporting empowered responses to concerns about the world for over 30 years now. And when it started years ago in the late 1970s, and I came across it in the mid 1980s, it was then known as despair and empowerment. It was about really providing a space for people to name their concerns, speak their grief. Um, and the gratitude came in later, and I really noticed the difference, because when we give time and attention to the gratitude, it resources us in a way that gives us a stronger starting point to then look at the stuff that's more difficult. So I'm going to suggest that we do this together. And this is what we're doing now, the 7 sentence starters in support of active hope. And the first 2, we're beginning with gratitude. And I love the number 42 when I'm thinking of gratitude. And 42, there's these 2 sides of gratitude. In fact, when we do this in the online course, we're actually going to be doing the 42 plus, looking at 3 elements of gratitude. But for here now, we're just looking at 2. There's what we're grateful for, which is about appreciation, and who or what we're grateful or thankful to, which is about thankfulness. And let's begin with the appreciation. I'm going to ask you just to notice how you're feeling right now. And then we're going to do a 1-minute gratitude practice where you have an open sentence that begins with the words, I love. And I'm going to invite you to write in the chat window whatever seems to follow that. And each time you say those words, I love, there might be something different that follows it. So you might have a whole string of things and then come back to I love again. And I'm going to ask Madeline to read out what's there. Okay, so I've got my 1-minute timer. Are you ready to take off? You might have already started.
It's already taking off. Here goes.
Okay, here we go. I love. 1 minute beginning. Well, you've already started.
Yeah.
Over to you.
I love walking in the woods, stroking the dog. People, this session, walking by the sea, running in the forest. I love the nature, the sound of rain on my tent, manifesting what I want, being in nature. I love sleep. I love life, Mother Earth. I love my niece, my husband and family, sitting by the fire, the sound of the wind, my people, my family. I love coming together and connecting. I love the sunshine and the sea, light dancing on water. I love life. I love universe. I love my friends and family. I love swimming in the ocean. Nature's beauty, kind people and the beauty of nature, my kids, my family, bats. I love good coffee. I love the courage of my students. I love solitude. I love my friends. Oh, but Chris, we've got so many more.
Okay, so there's a real power in time constraints. And one of the things about the spiral is sometimes people can have a fear of getting stuck in one place. You know, I don't want to go there because I might get stuck there, particularly around pain for the world. And what we're doing is, because we're on a journey, we can be reassured that we're not going to get stuck somewhere. We're on a journey where we're passing through. Joanna Macy talks about these as stations of the spiral. So we've just been at the station of gratitude. And I just want to, I'm going to stop the share. And what I'm going to do is just ask you to do thumbs up if you feel in any way more energized or more buoyant or uplifted by what you've just heard. Can look at those hands there. Okay, now what you've also heard, this is just an idea, is that we are a group that has spoken through us. And more than that, we are a group that has just written a poem about what we love. The poem's called I Love, and it was spoken by Madeline, but actually it was written by us. And there's something very interesting here about when us speaks through me, when us happens through me. Now, I'm jumping ahead here. This is part of the seeing with new eyes, but it's just opening the idea that sometimes we're part of something larger that happens through us. And anyway, I'm really interested in it. I love the poem, but actually I know that it goes beyond that, because there's another verse to this poem. And if we think of 42, what I'm grateful for, but there's also who or what I'm grateful to. And the next verse of this poem is called I'd Like to Thank. And I'd just like you to hold that question. Okay, who am I grateful to? What am I grateful to? Who have I received from or what have I received from, that I'd like to express thanks here now? This is a Thanksgiving circle, and we have 1 minute together beginning now. Just write in the chat window, inviting you to write in the chat window. And Madeline, I'm going to invite you just to have the group speak through you.
Marvelous. So I'd like to thank my parents, who were my greatest teachers. Mother Nature, New Age, it saved my life. The earth. I'd like to thank my ancestors. I'd like to thank my ex-girlfriend. The animals in my life. I'd like to thank you all. My mum, my parents for life. My parents, my mother, Mother Earth. I'd like to thank my husband, the trees, you all, you, my husband who loves me so well. I'd like to thank the ancestors of 3.5 billion years of evolution, great teachers, activists, the sun. I'd like to thank my garden, my dear friends, all my spiritual companions, my sister, my parents for giving me life, my friends.
I'd like to thank you, all of you, for showing up. And I love this idea that we are part of an incredible story, and it's called The Great Turning. And I'm really interested in how turning points happen. But there's something about, there's a turning point, but there's also a turning process. A turning process, and a turning process has different elements, but one of them is just turning up. We have turned up together in this moment, and there's a wider timescape than just this moment, because some of you may be turning up listening to the recording, watching the recording. But also in terms of turning points, sometimes you can be feeling like you're really struggling, and you're thinking, okay, what can I do as a regenerative practice, as a way of drawing strengths? I had this image here of the roots. And I wanted to introduce that we're beginning this 7-sentence starter in support of Active Hope, but it begins by doing the 42. That's what we've just done. We just do the 42. And I just wonder what it would be like if every morning you just spent 2 minutes doing the 42. This is just an invitation and encouragement. So I do this while I'm walking. I just say, okay, I love, and I mumble to myself, and roll out some of the things I love. And then I think, okay, I'd like to thank. And I just roll through. And what that does sometimes is it actually nudges me to reach out and express my thanks. And that's actually the 42 plus, which we look at. How do you actually act on the experience of gratitude by reaching out and expressing gratitude? And gratitude's hidden depths, really. There's so much beneath the surface. But one of them is it nourishes our pro-social behavior. That when we have more awareness of what we're receiving, it increases our inclination to give back. But also one of the things is in this spiral is when we give attention to what we love and what we're grateful to, it's also kind of quite natural that we're also aware of the sadness at how threatened much of this may be. And so how do we deal with the feelings that come up when we face the mess? And I want to just introduce this idea of honoring. We honor when we treat with high regard. And if we were to, and this may be familiar to many of you, but it's not familiar more broadly in our culture, this idea of honoring our pain for the world, treating with high regard. You might think, why? Well, one is treat in high regard as an alarm call. You know, when there's a fire alarm and it makes its horrible noise, it's not tranquilizing. It's not kind of music to feel relaxed to. It jolts us, but in a way as a wake-up call. And I want to really honor our pain as a wake-up call. It is a call to action, but also in terms of what helps us hold it. So there's the meaning we give it. There's also recognizing that we're not alone, providing a space where we can hear each other. And also trusted practices can help us hold it too. And we're going to introduce one in just a little while. But I also want to recognize that when we give room for our pain, I'm remembering Maya, she said, well, you know, what's the point of feeling this if I can't do anything anyway? And so carrying on round the spiral, I think of gratitude and honoring our pain as about being present, taking in both the beauty and the horror of the times we live in. But when we take that in, there's this question of what can I do? And so seeing with new eyes, one of the exercises I do is I get people to look at this image or an image like it, and I ask the question, what can you see? And I'm going to ask you this right now. So what do you see? What do you see on the screen? Just write in the chat window, and the meaning of this or the reason for this will become clear. And Madeline, I'm going to ask those answers to come through you or be spoken through you.
Okay, they're going very thick and fast. So we've got a clock, faces, a diversity of rectangles, different colors, windows, community, windows in a circle, Stonehenge, a circle of squares, empty houses, multicolored, oh, no, that one went before I could read it, a group, warm shapes, evening light.
By the way, just what you've heard already, I don't know if there's anyone says that's wrong. It's not that. You can shake your head if you know. I'm not getting a sense of that. I'm getting a sense of your. You know, there's a lot of people here, so I don't know what you're thinking, but I'm sensing a sense of, well, these are different descriptions of the same thing. There's something very important here, how we can look at the same thing, but choose different words to describe it. And that doesn't mean that one person is right or another person is wrong. I often say, you know, if you look through your eyes, and you look through one eye and then the other, which view is right? Which view is right? And you could say, well, it's my right eye, but actually both eyes give a different view. And it's through having those different views combining together that you get depth of vision. And so I say this because there's a principle in logic called the law of contradiction, which is when somebody has a different view, that you know, if A is true and B is different to A, then B can't be true as well. This idea of difference is contradiction. And I want to really brush that aside, and I want to embrace difference, embrace diversity of views. But the reason I do this here is just to recognize that there are someone said a circle of squares. And when you say a circle of squares, those are different ways of looking. And this idea that if you ask the question, what's it made of? You focus on the pieces and you might see squares, or someone said rectangles. But if you look at a piece and you say, what's it part of? You see the larger circle. And circles happen through squares. I say this because I find this a tremendously inspiring idea, that larger things can happen through smaller things, that and in a way you could say, well, that's the problem, you know, the problems happen through all the tiny steps we take. But there's also a way in which the great turning can happen through the many tiny things. And also when we look at problems, if I was to say, you know, what square causes the circle, that might seem a silly question. The circle is caused by many squares acting together. There's something here, a difference in how we look. So I find that an inspiring idea. And seeing with new eyes is about opening to encouraging and inspiring perspectives that help us find and play our part. And I'm going to suggest that we hear from each other just over about 10 minutes, that we go into breakout rooms, groups of 3 or 4. Now, you're going to need to be very focused on time to make this work. But also, I'm going to say aim for progress rather than perfection. And I'm going to suggest that you have 2 rounds where perhaps one of you is timer. And when a minute has come, just raise your hand to show the time. And that's really inviting somebody to stop and hear from each other around the sentence that goes, when I think about the future we're heading into, my concerns include. And Madeline, I'm going to ask you just to put that in the chat window if you're happy to. When I think about the future we're heading into, my concerns include. So that's round 1. And then in terms of what resources us to face those concerns, a second round, and it doesn't even have to be a minute each. It might just be, you know, a few sentences each. What inspires me is, we need to hear from each other around that. I'm going to suggest that we just jump into it, that we jump into breakout rooms. 1 round, when I look at the future we're heading into, my concerns include. And round 2 is what inspires me is. And if you're listening to the recording, I suggest you press the pause button and you just consider these 2 sentence starters. Maybe just write in a notebook. That might be one way of doing it. Anyway, here we go. It seems to have ground to a halt after 15 rooms. For anyone who's not in a breakout room, I just want to say hi. I want to welcome you to, we're in a super breakout room. And I love the idea of whatever happens, see if you can find the best possible version of it. So here we are, you know, and I'm going to invite you to write in the chat window. We're going to do a large group version of this. And if it moves you into chat breakout rooms, that's fine. But if it doesn't, we're just here and we're seeing what's the best version of this. So I'm inviting you to write. So I'm going to read here. Susan, my concerns are for my children's future. Madeline, I feel deep sadness about the extinction of species. Inviting any others of you want to write in the chat window. What are your concerns when you look at the future we're heading into?
So there are some higher up in the chat, Chris.
Okay, would you like to read any that you've seen?
Yeah. When I think about the future we're heading into, my concerns include the state of our mental health and wellness in my family, community, and country. I feel sadness for the children growing up into this. My concerns include pain and suffering. My concerns include the rise of parasites and superbacteria. My concerns include the destruction of habitats and extinction of species, the slavery of animals and the oppression of many humans and other than humans in the world. And then we've got, I'm concerned that the direction of travel will continue to be controlled by the desire for wealth and power, not the needs of the planet.
So I'm going to ask us also to honour those. We're receiving those concerns. And it's the group expressing its concerns through us. But if we were to then say, okay, what inspires me is, so if there was a sentence that started, what inspires me is, what would you write in? What would you write in? What inspires me is, just writing in the chat window.
I'm going to cheat with starting with my own. What inspires me is people making the effort to unlearn racism and other prejudices. What inspires me is the capacity for humans to connect, like today. What inspires me is wonderful people. What inspires me is the opportunity for all of us to experience this pause and this opening within us to look deeper within. What inspires me is the wealth of individuals who are making a difference in small ways every day. What inspires me is that there are so many souls working toward the creation of a more beautiful world.
Thank you. I'm going to invite people to come back into the larger room. So I'm going to giving people just a minute so to finish off in their breakout rooms. And I want to say welcome back to the larger group. We had a mixture. Some of you were in small groups and some of you had a supersized breakout room. And sorry if your conversations got cut off anywhere, but there was a question about what's the difference, or could I speak to a bit about the difference between a prompt and a question? So a prompt might be where you give something that is like a springboard that encourages somebody to speak to something. So like an open sentence, like what inspires me is ... For myself, I like those. I like sentence starters as invitations to explore areas. But another approach, and this is a style thing for you to try different things, see what works for you, is to have a question that you respond to, sort of like saying, oh, I wonder what people feel inspired by. Or you know, if you were to share what you find inspiring, I wonder what that is. And so if you have something that ends with ... that's more like a prompt. If you have something that ends with a question mark, that's another approach. So I'm wondering, how was that short time in small groups? And I saw Susie, you said really appreciated that. And Madeline, I'm just going to ask you to pick up any other responses there in groups. So it's really interesting. I was in a Zoom group recently and somebody says, you know, what I'm really appreciating is that my cup of personal energy can be filled by a Zoom meeting rather than drained by one. And there's something here about what are conversations that energize us. So and also, it's not going to necessarily hit the right spot with everyone all the time. But what we're looking at here is how do we have conversations together that help us name what is true for us and also find ways of responding to it. Madeline, any other comments to pick up on what
There's a lot being commented in the chat. So actually, yes, energizing and enlivening, touching, amazing, inspirational, feeling replenished, very connective very quickly. And I love this that Karen says that, in my opinion, I did a courageous thing. And I think that's one of the things that's so energizing, is this feeling of being courageous and doing that. It felt encouraging, connecting, wonderful and inspiring. It helped to normalize feelings. And we found the concerns part so painful. None of us took the full minute. Almost too short, but effective and meaningful. And there is so much more in there. So.
And I also want to pick up what Jonathan mentioned, is that sometimes without time, you kind of think, well, we didn't get time to go on to the bit where we're seeing with new eyes. So let's just do that now. Let's just do that now. And what I'm going to ask is, Madeline, if you could pick out some of the things where we in our large group were saying, what inspires me is, do you want to just pick out a few of those and invite all of you who are in the groups maybe to share with the larger group what you found inspiring? Because this is important information for us in this time, that we can feel sunk. We can feel depleted by just the scale of what we feel. And don't be surprised if you notice a change in how your body is when you really give your attention to the mess that we're in, the difficult things there. And so we need to, there's a saying in recovery groups, they say, look, don't stare. We need to look enough to be aware of, but then we need to do this piece of work, which is about resourcing ourselves to respond. And Madeline, if you want to pick up just some of the things that people said, what inspires me is...
Yep, there's so many there. So what inspires me is the way in which we are coming together to have new conversations, trees communicating together, young people who are very inspired to do the work and make the sacrifices for the future. Canada geese on the beach. There is a real strong yearning for change now.
And I was just saying a little snippet there, thank you. But also, I'm aware of time and we're on a journey. And it's about not stopping in any one particular station for too long. This is the short form. And you may have experienced longer forms where we spend a bit more time on each one. In our 6-week course, we'll spend a week on each one. But also, you say a week looking at a pain for our world. It's also this thing about a spiral. You can do a spiral every day. You can do a spiral every hour. If you feel that you're going too much into the pain, then you might think, okay, I just need to stop and recharge, regenerate. It might be that I begin with gratitude and then go into it again. Or it might be I carry on around the spiral and look for giving my attention to inspiring perspectives. But then also what's really important with this spiral is the going forth. And I want to move on to that. The going forth is like saying, really, what can I do about this? What's my part to play? And if we're looking at active hope, the place I'd like to begin is looking at the future we're heading into. What I deeply hope for is, and we're just going to do a minute on this, inviting you to write in the chat window, when looking at the future we're heading into, what I deeply hope for is, just inviting you to write.
So amongst this group of active hopers, some of the things we deeply hope for are people who are fighting for human rights and freedom, compassion, solidarity, the downfall of capitalism, harmony, health and peace, equality, courage, humanity waking up, that we can step into love, a more connected and tolerant society, a new way of being, transformation, peace in Burma, people power to bring down corporations, responsibility, kindness, for people to embrace awakening. What I deeply hope for is that I get to start an environmentally based intentional community in my area. Awakening. Human beings getting a sense of interdependence and connection, putting all people first. Understanding. To feel and reflect and connect. Courage, kindness.
Thank you so much. I'd love you just to think back for a moment for the circle happens through the squares, that image of a circle of squares. The circle happens through the squares. And then also just to consider, what would it be like if our hopes happen through us? If our hopes are like purposes that tap us on the shoulder and say, hey, can I happen through you? And it won't be just us. There may be hopes that happen through many different people, but what's important is that we give something to our hopes. This is our gift of active hope. It's what do we offer to support our hopes? And that's what I want to move to next, is like a part I'd like to play in support of this is. So where this is the hopes that have been mentioned, thinking back, what was the hope? What do you deeply hope for? And what part would you like to play in support of this? So that's a question, and a prompt would be, a part I'd like to play in support of this is 1 minute on your chosen hope, beginning now.
So some parts we would like to play in support of this is becoming a healer, giving love, giving warmth, giving soulful nourishment, to dedicate my life to this, learning to talk with those who are quite different from me, holding the space to co-create the new, overcoming limitations, helping others to remember and come back to who they truly are, helping people and helping nature, to be a work that reconnects facilitator, opportunities for many to connect with their wilder selves in wilder places, to be educated on active hope process and start a group, keeping a connection with people. I want to encourage others to keep hope, giving up fish, awakener. I would like to be a pioneer in this movement, being a healer and storyteller, holding on, tending our land, supporting people in finding hope in their hearts, healing the land.
Thank you. I think of geese, and there's something about when geese go together, it actually makes flying easier. And as well as leadership, there's this lovely term, followership. So just thinking of those different steps of stepping forward you've heard, just think, what would it be like to be an ally to those who've mentioned playing their part? And just so this is part of Active Hope too, is a part I'd like to play. So a part I'd like to play in support of this is being an ally to all of you. Feeling that I'm part of a larger network, a larger circle. We can be alongside each other in this. But also, if we ask the question, the circle happens through the squares. The hope happens through the people taking it forward. What would it look like if that happened in the next 7 days? What would it look like if the hope happened through you in the next 7 days? And thinking, well, okay, a step I'll take. So of the part you'd like to play, what can you do in the next 7 days to take it forward? So this is our last part of the 7-sentence starters in support of Active Hope. Over to you, just 1 minute, just writing in the chat window. A step I'll take towards this in the next week is...
being open to possibilities. Research heart-opening practices, research communal housing projects, meet with my Active Hope online group, positive energy, write a hopeful story, re-energize my personal practice, start the course, overcoming fear, voice my intentions, talk about this, keep working step by step, finish the half-finished tasks, believe in myself, cultivate together, practice kindness, plan a workshop, team up with Dancing into Active Hope co-facilitator, be braver, breathe my pain and send compassion, talk about this with a buddy, have fun, read the right books, really get into this process.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Madeline. And thank you so much, all of you. What I'm just aware of is, I love this idea of when we're stuck, what's a thread that we can just pick up and follow? What's a thread? What helps us find our thread? And I'm thinking of the story of Ariadne and the following the thread, you know, in the can't even remember all the details, but just this image of when I'm feeling lost, what helps me find my way through a maze? How do I pick up a thread and follow it? And in Active Hope, Joanna Macy and I, in chapter 2, we talk about 3 threads to follow. And one is the thread of an adventure story. This idea of adventure stories tend to begin in difficult places. But what really makes the story is the main characters rising to the occasion, stepping up and say, I'm going to play my part. And sometimes at the beginning of the story, they don't know what they're going to do. It all feels too much. They might feel defeated. They might feel underpowered. But a common feature of stories is going on some kind of quest to seek out the allies, the implements, the insights that will help them find their way, that will help them play their role. And that's why we've set up ActiveHope.Training. That's the website, ActiveHope.Training, is to really look at what helps us find our thread. What helps us pick up and find and follow our thread. And over the weeks, we go through the spiral of the work that reconnects. And our goal is really looking at Active Hope, not just as a practice for collective well-being, but it's a practice that we can get better at. It's a practice we can train ourselves in, that we can become more skillful in, but also we can all play roles in spreading this skill, in a collective upskilling in our capacity to play our part, to make a difference, to act for positive change. And that's what this larger purpose is. We've got 2 websites. One is activehope.info, which is about the book and is going to be a hub for information about Active Hope more generally. But ActiveHope.Training, we're setting up as this course. We invite you to join us. There's a handout for the 7-sentence starters available on there. And if you have trouble joining the course, just write and let us know. There's a contact page at activehope.info. I'm aware of the time and we're going to need to draw to a close. But what I'm going to ask you to do is just write in the chat window, what are you taking away? What are you taking away from this time together? We've just had an hour together. What are you taking away? That helps us. But also you remind yourself. You remind yourself. Madeline, I'm going to ask you again just to pick up some of the things that people are taking away from this.
Sorry, I was too busy writing one.
Ah.
Motivation, connection, a fuller heart, hope, conviction, a deeper commitment, gratitude and inspiration, positivity, we can make a difference, love, 42 every day, a smile, that this is the right moment, people are ready for hope, gratitude for all of us. There are others who are suffering grief, not just me. Warmth, intention to change, togetherness. You've re-inspired me. Thank you.
And so I'm going to suggest that we close with 3 breaths together. So if we can see your hands, and you might want to have your view so that you can see everyone's hands. So as we breathe in and we breathe out. We breathe in. And we breathe out. We breathe in. Knowing that we're not alone. That there is a larger breathing through us happening. Inspiration, co-inspiration. And we can say goodbye. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Look forward to joining any of you on the video-based online course at ActiveHope.Training.